Hey everybody, coming at you live from my gear room, my soon to be doubled in sized and remodeled gear room. So this video, there's several reasons why I am doing this video. Now the last video I did was on batoning. Now in that video I batoned some wood and I showed some tenders and I showed flame working time, and I'll admit a lot of times what I'm showing or what I'm planning on showing on the video doesn't turn out like it should, and a lot of times what's in my mind doesn't relate to what gets put on the video. Therefore sometimes I can be misunderstood, and I think there was some misunderstandings on that video because I got multiple repeat comments about the tender, because I showed the cattail fluff and how fast it lit off, and then I showed the feather stick, how it took a bunch of strikes to get it going, but once you got it going you had more time to work with it. Because what I was trying to do is I was trying to get across the concept of flame working time, and I didn't really explain that the way I was doing things was to make a point. But because the multiple comments was, why don't you use the two together? Well, the thing is yes, I use them together. I use multiple tenders together when the object is to actually make a fire. That object was to try and make a point between flame tender time and twigs and batoned wood. So I think if I get a bunch of more comments like that, I'll be able to post this video and say, watch this and I'll explain. So anyway, we're going to go outside and I'm going to go over that. Now the other reason that I'm doing this video is because no matter what, I like to post on a regular schedule. I don't know if y'all keep up with it or not, but the most I can do is every other week. Every other Friday. And no matter how busy I get, I want to try to barf up some kind of a video for y'all. So, because in reality, I have been living at work. I've been working 7 days a week. It's been very hot. It's just draining me. And in the middle of that, about a month ago, it flooded here in the basement, and I've been remodeling the gear room, which you can see behind me. There's some changes made. And I've been promising everybody a tour of the gear room when it's finished, because before I just couldn't show everybody because it was so trashed. The area where I kept like my machetes and some of my gear and where I planned some of my trips on that table, I showed it, but the rest of the room was just trashed. I'm talking about just piles of stuff everywhere. Well, I'm remodeling it. It's doubling, maybe even tripling in size, and I'm trying to organize everything. And it's funny, the more I organize, the more I want to organize. It's like I had in my mind years ago the things I wanted to do, and as I'm doing them now, I'm finding other things that are just popping in my head, and I'm like, oh, I want to do that. I want to hang my sleeping bags over here. I want to hang my bivy sacks over here. I want to build a new rack for my axes. And I did do the axe rack. I got it done. A place for my boots and my hats, and a place where I can stage, my backpack and the contents. So, and on and on and on. But anyway, basically the gear room's half tore apart. There's bits and pieces put together, lots of stuff's in boxes, lots of stuff in piles. I can't get to my stuff to plan and prepare for a decent video. So that's another reason why I'm doing this video. It's kind of like an update, but then, we're going to run outside and I'm going to talk a little bit about tenders, and then I'll make a quick fire just to kind of prove the point of another thing. That last video was batoning wood and flame working time. This is going to be like stages of tender and how they work together and how they work with gravity. So, but anyway, that's the update. I've been working 7 days a week. I've been living at work. I've been working on the gear room. It's all tore apart. There's no time to prepare a decent outdoor video. It's always easier to do in the winter. I don't know why. Summers are just so busy. But anyway, so that's where it stands. So let's go outside and play around a little bit, and then after this video I'm going to continue working on the gear room, and I promise the full tour. It may not be completely finished, but I think you'll like it. So let's go outside. Last video I talked about flame working time, and what that is whenever you go to strike up a tender with a ferro rod, how long it flames up and how long you've got time to work with your kindling over your tinder. Okay. Now, once again, remember there's tinder, kindling, and fuel. Tinder will take a spark and turn it into a flame. Kindling will it will accept a flame within, I think it's 60 seconds, 30 to 60 seconds, and then everything else is fuel. Okay. Well, there's also stages of tinder itself. Tinder is supposed to be what will accept a spark. Now, this is never talked about the stages of tinder. Okay. But that's also because it's directly related to flame working time. So the first stage of tinder is the fluffiest of the fluffy. Okay, it's like thistle, fluffy thistle, or cattail fluff. Okay, this stuff right here will take a spark in 1 to 3 seconds. Okay, all right, that's like the first stage of tinder. Now, the second stage of tinder would be like the tops of some weeds, this fluffy stuff right here, but in the dry leaves. Okay, this is like maybe 3 to 5 seconds, and then and then I'm going to explain something else about it after going through all this. Okay, this is the broom sages and grasses and things and straw grass. These things here, it's like a middle stage of tinder, 3 to 5 seconds depending on how dry they are. Okay. Now, and then the last stage of tinder is the one that, and a lot of people make fun of people using them because they take so long to spark off. It takes about 10 to 15 to 20 strikes on your ferro rod. Okay, and that is things like bark and like this is the inner bark of a pine tree. Okay, now this stuff right here, the way you light it off is you either scrape it to where there's some scrapings on it, and you can do it with your ferro rod, or you just set the ferro rod on it and just keep showering it with sparks until you're sparking, heating it up and getting it going. Okay. Now the other thing, one of my favorites, and of course everybody talks about birch bark, but birch bark is not in this area, so I do not use it. Somebody has sent me some and it's cool to play with, but I don't use it because it ain't in this area. Cedar bark. If you find a cedar tree, the cedar bark itself can be broken up, the fibers can, and the more you break it up, the less strikes it takes to ignite it. That's like one of your last stages of tinder. Or you can pull off the very, very outer, and it's just real fluffy stuff. Okay. And then the last stage of tinder, without moving up to being kindling, is the good old feather sticks and curls. Okay. Now, here's the deal. Like I said in the last video, I did what I did, because basically it was showing the difference between batoned wood and twigs and flame working time. Well, the reason that I use this most of the time, I do use tinders all the time when they're available. See, that's the key. That is the key there. This cattail right here, it's usually in wet areas. I don't always find that in the woods. The thistle, certain times of year, you don't have those blooms. Sometimes a year, those blooms are wet. Grass. Good old grass. A lot of times in the summer, all the grass you're going to find is going to be green. In the winter, when you find the dead grass, it may not be dry. It may all be wet. So, but if it's available, that's what I use, especially on tinder bundles. And then that's like these grasses here. A lot of times in the weed, things like daisy, fleabane, and goldenrod, it's not dead. And when it is dead, a lot of times it's wet. But if you can find it with a fluff, that's great. And so basically, I just trained myself because what is always available? Wood. Wood is always available. And that's why I like using feathers and feather sticks and batoning and all that kind of stuff. So that's basically it. Like I said, everybody preaches tinder, kindling, fuel. But they don't get real in depth in it and tell you there's different stages of tinder. Okay? So let's take these, and I'm going to show you one more thing about cattail. And the cattail is the basis for this stages of tinder fire. I've heard the type of fire I'm going to show you. I've never seen other people show it, but I've heard it nicknamed the reaction fire because there is a reaction from one stage of tinder to the next. And gravity, always remember, those of you that work with fire, they claim you know, some people really understand fire and some don't. To really understand fire, understand gravity is your friend. And fire defies gravity. Fire wants to climb. It wants to rise. And so what you're going to do is you're going to have your fire rising through these stages of tinder. And this fire is good because at a lot of those Boy Scout camps, I would sit there and watch these scouts go through 5 boxes of matches, light a match, light a match, light a match. I never could get a fire going. And then finally I would come over and I would explain to them, because I wouldn't show them at first. I'd let them have the trouble, and then I would show them the stages of tinder, and every time I got a fire, and they remembered it. So anyway, one thing I'm going to show you, and then we're going to build a fire. Okay, done enough rambling. All right, cattail fluff. This stuff is dry as a bone. Okay. Here it is unfluffed. Now the more you fluff it, the better it works. This stuff here is dry as a bone, and you would think that you could just light it. So let's look at this right here. Let me light this little bit of fluff right here. And see how easy it burnt? Now as fluffy as that is, it didn't all burn up. Okay? You know why? I'm fixing to explain why. Let's strike this thing again. This is all fluffed up, and let's strike it again. Alright. The way this stuff works. Okay, this is something very important that I want you to pay attention to. And this applies to all fluffy tinder. Okay, this is another thing. Makes me talk about gravity. When you have something that's very, very fluffy like this, and you strike it with a ferro rod, it'll burn, and these flames are going to try to rise. Okay? So what you want to do is when you're building a fire with different stages of tinder, you don't want to strike the top. You want to try to strike the underneath and have your stages of tinder stacked. Because when the flames go under, they have no choice but to burn their way through to the top. Now I was striking from the top, and it would flame up and go out. Alright, so I'm going to show you how to do the reaction fire. And this, now it was the chain reaction fire, that was it. That's what it was nicknamed. And so I'm going to show you that, and it works with every tinder you can find. So I'm going to put multiple tinders on it, and I'm going to show you how, you know, there's no blowing on it, there's no fighting with it. You strike it and you sit there and watch it. Okay? Alright, so let's get it prepared. Cedar bark. Alright, so let's see what we can do here now. If I can keep the cat out of the way. Let's see. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of these small sticks right here and I'm going to stab them in the ground. Now what these are going to do, I think I'm going to move the camera a little bit closer. As I'm doing this. Okay. So I'm going to stab some sticks in the ground here. Now what these are going to do are that not only are these going to contain some of the fluff, but they're going to, now notice when I'm tapping with the blade away from my hand. Not only are these going to contain some of the fluff, but they're going to support some of the other tenders. I think that's plenty good enough right there. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take, let's see, I'm going to randomly put a little bit of wood in between here, because this is going to give the fluff something to land on. Okay, so now I've got all these stabbed in the ground. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to get some bigger ones, some taller ones. Probably should have went through all this stuff a little bit better. Let's get some taller ones here. Let's see. Here's one. You know, I should have batoned this thing up. I'm going to baton one more right here real quick. Always prepared. Right? I didn't baton. It's alright. Sharpen it up a little bit. Oh. Make it stick in the ground. Let's make this one stick in the ground. And how about one more tall one? Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Let's move you back. Alright. Wait a minute. What's going on here? Alright. I think I got you now. We've got all these little sticks here, and then we've got the taller sticks here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put a pile of curls in the middle. Alright. Okay. Now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take cattail fluff. And I'm going to fluff this up real good. Okay. Fluffy, fluffy, fluffy. I'm going to use half a cattail. A lot of times I'll carry these things around in my bag or my pack or whatever. Alright. Now as you can see what I've done, I had the little pieces stabbed in the ground. I've covered them with fluff. And so what I do now is when you have a grass like broom sage or sawgrass or just whatever, you want to put the fluff down and the thicker stems up top, because you want the gravity to work with you. So what you're going to do is you're going to lay these here. Put all these here. Trying to lean all these together like this. Okay, now as I'm holding these, I'm going to put some larger wood in here. And I'm going to try to lean all these together and hope it don't fall. Alright, now I'm probably going to, I may move the camera. Let's see. Alright, yeah, let me move the camera. No, I'll just go ahead and do it like this. Now I want to take little bits and pieces of cedar bark, and I want to put the little bits and pieces of the cedar bark all inside there. Yeah, this is probably gonna, this might collapse. I'm gonna shove all the cedar bark down inside. And I'm gonna put some cedar bark up here in the top. This should be bent over. This definitely ain't looking like I thought it should. It usually looks kind of neat looking. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay wood. I got to leave a little spot right here. As you can see right down here is where I'm going to strike it with the ferro rod. So that, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to lean wood all around here. Anywhere that I can. Alright, take a couple more of these. Lay these up. Now see, that wood just knocked over. The wood just got knocked over right there, but it's caught against the wood that I have stabbed in the ground. That is a must-have. I think you can see it now. Putting some more on here. Now I'm going to break this in half. That's what I really should have done with the others. And then I'm going to lay these on here. I'm just slowly building everything up. And the inner workings of the fire has the things it needs to be successful. This is going to go off like an inferno. Alright, I'm going to take some more feathers and sprinkle some more feathers right up here, because they're being held now. See, they're held off the ground. And when I strike the fluffy stuff down in the bottom, the flames are going to come up, and as they grab this, it's all going to fall down into the bottom there. And then I'm going to take some smaller baton pieces, and I'm just going to lay the baton pieces up at the top. And once they catch, I'm going to let them fall into the fire, because I have pieces down at the bottom. Right. Now, this is starting to look like a big old mess. Lay a couple more on here. Take some more of my feathers, my curls, put a little more curls on top. Alright, now let's light it. I hope the cats will get out of the way. Let me move this camera back out of the way. Alright, let's see what it does. Alright. Come on, cat, move out of the way. Oh, go on. Alright, now I'm going to take my ferro rod and I'm going to light it off. So let's see how it does. Alright. Now see how the things are falling over? Watch how the flames are traveling up. See how big the flames are now? Look how high up they are. Well, that was one strike, and I used stages of tinder. Now a lot of times if you use nothing but fluffy stuff, the fire will die down. But it is not going to die down now. It's all going to fall into itself, because each stage of tinder is burning. Now you'll note on that last video I would strike and strike and strike and strike and strike, and that's because I was using I was striking on the feathers. And like I said, all the hundreds of comments of why don't you use the two together? Well, I do. So as you can see, this is just, it ain't died yet. And I know this scene is long, but I didn't want to cut it off because I didn't want there to be any funny stuff. I didn't want anybody to think that I'd put anything in that fire to make it this combustible. And you can see the fire hasn't, normally when you make a TP fire, it'll collapse amongst itself. But the way I stabbed the smaller pieces in the ground and then I stabbed the 4 pieces around it, it's managed to hold everything pretty good. You can see the flames are still plenty high enough. And this is actually a pretty good warming fire because with everything stood up the way it is, the flames are like tremendously tall because you're allowing oxygen to get under everything. And see, that's definitely not a fire that's going to die out. It's going to burn and burn and burn. One strike and you're there. See, the sticks that are stabbed in the ground are holding everything up, allowing the oxygen to get to the fuel. Fuel being the larger wood. See, it's just now collapsing, but it's still going. Alright, I hope I explained myself a little bit better on there. Sometimes I get real scatterbrained because there's so many things that I'm thinking and so many things that I want to say and relay to you on the camera. But hopefully you learned a little bit of something about this, about the stages of tinder and how you can stack them up and how gravity works with you and how you got to get underneath. You get your primary tinder, it goes underneath your secondary and your third stages of tinder, and gravity will just whoosh and just catch everything on fire and let it fall down like that. So like say if you got, you know, even if you had like one match, that's a guaranteed fire right there if you set it up this way. So anyway, sorry I didn't have a more exciting video, but I'm doing the best that I can. But once the and see at this point you start throwing more wood on. But you're really going to love the gear room. The remodel is going to be excellent. And I've been wanting to do this for years. So, hope you had fun. Hope you learned something. Get out and enjoy the life, no matter how hot and humid it is. And we're all looking forward to winter. And I shall see you in the next one.